Monaco, 1998. The Hôtel de Paris in Monaco. Its grand ballroom, glittering with chandeliers, and the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. A private charity dinner for 200 of Europe's most influential people. Alain Delon, 62 years old, walked through the entrance doors in an impeccably tailored black suit and froze completely when he saw who was standing across the room. Jean-Paul Belmondo, his rival, his mirror, his opposite, the one man he'd spent 30 long years competing with, being compared to, trying to surpass. They hadn't spoken in 15 years. What happened in the next hour wasn't planned by anyone. It was just two legends, two massive egos, one table, and a conversation that would redefine both their legacies and prove that rivalry, when finally confronted honestly, transforms into something unexpected, something like unexpected brotherhood. The charity dinner was for Princess Grace Foundation, raising money for young emerging artists. Monaco society showed up because that's what Monaco society did. Actors, directors, wealthy donors, politicians, old European money mixing with new entertainment money. Everyone dressed perfectly. Everyone performing their carefully assigned role. Everyone pretending they weren't constantly calculating their position in the room's invisible hierarchy. Alain Delon had arrived alone, as usual. No wife, no date, no entourage whatsoever. He preferred it that way. Easier to leave when he wanted. Easier to control the narrative. He'd been seated at table 7 carefully, positioned carefully by some well-meaning organizer who'd tried to balance prestige with diplomacy. Then he saw Belmondo, across the room, 65 years old now, still charismatic, still commanding attention without trying, still everything Delon had competed against for decades, for 3 decades. The comparison had started in the early 1960s, when they'd both exploded onto French cinema at approximately the same time. Delon with Plein Soleil, beautiful and dangerous. Belmondo with Breathless, rough and electric. The press had immediately created a rivalry that both men had fed with competitive fire. Who was the bigger star? Who was the better actor? Who represented French masculinity? The questions never stopped coming. The comparisons were absolutely constant. Every film reviewed against the other's latest work. Every interview asking about the other. Every award ceremony. An opportunity for photographers to capture them in the same frame, searching for tension. And there was tension. Real professional tension. Not manufactured for publicity. They genuinely competed. For roles. For directors. For the top position in French cinema. They took turns being number one. When Delon made Le Samouraï, Belmondo made Le Magnifique. When Belmondo dominated the box office with comedies, Delon went dark with thrillers. Different styles, different approaches, same stratosphere exactly. The last time they'd been in the same room was 1983, a film festival in Cannes. They'd been seated at opposite ends of a long table, spent the entire dinner pretending the other didn't exist. Photographers had captured their studied indifference. The headline read, "The Cold War of French Cinema." 15 years later, here they were again somehow. Monaco, a charity dinner. Nowhere to hide now. Belmondo saw Delon at almost the exact moment Delon saw him. Their eyes met across 50 feet of expensive carpet and elegant guests. Neither smiled, neither nodded acknowledgement. They just looked, measuring, calculating. Then Belmondo did something completely unexpected. He started walking toward Delon, not aggressive, just deliberate. The room's energy shifted immediately. People noticed, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Everyone understood what was happening. The two legends were about to interact. Delon stood his ground firmly, didn't retreat, didn't advance, just waited. his face completely neutral. Professional. Belmondo reached him. Stopped 3 feet away. That invisible distance that's too far for intimacy. Too close for strangers. Alain. Jean-Paul. Silence. 10 seconds that felt like an hour. Then Belmondo extended his hand. Delon looked at it. The hand that had thrown punches in 100 action films. The hand that represented everything Delon had competed against. Then he took it. They shook. Firm. Brief. Professional. I heard you were in Monaco. I live here. I heard.
How's retirement?
I'm not retired. Neither am I. Another silence. But different now. Less hostile. More curious. Belmondo gestured to the bar. Can I buy you a drink? This is an open bar. We're at a charity dinner. Then I'll stand next to you while you get your own drink. Delon almost smiled. Almost. They walked to the bar together. The room watched. Everyone pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. The bartender poured them both scotch without being asked. Apparently even bartenders knew their preferences. They moved to a quiet corner, away from the tables, away from the curious eyes. Not private, but less public. Belmondo spoke first. 30 years is a very long time to hate someone. I never hated you. You competed with me. That's different. Belmondo smiled. Finally, a real smile.
So did you.
We were both trying to be number one. There's only one number one position. That's the real problem. We spent 3 decades fighting for a title that doesn't actually exist. What do you mean? Belmondo took a drink. I mean there is no number one. You did different things than me. Then I did different things than you. The press created a competition. We believed them. Then we spent our careers trying to win a game that was rigged from the start because there was no real winner. Only different paths. Delon considered this carefully. Took his own drink. That's very philosophical for you. I got old. Philosophy happens when your knees hurt and you realize you wasted time on stupid shit. Delon did smile then. Small, but real. Is that what we were? Stupid shit? The competition? Yes. Belmondo was emphatic. Complete stupid shit. I see that now. Do you know what I think about when I look at your career? The roles you took that I wanted. No. I think about the roles I took that you would have made better. And I think about how we could have learned from each other if we hadn't been so busy trying to destroy each other. This stopped Delon completely. For the first time in the conversation, his face showed something other than control. You wanted to learn from me. Are you joking? Belmondo laughed. Of course I did. You had something I never had. Control. Precision. You made stillness dangerous. I was all movement. All energy. But you could stand completely still and dominate a frame. I envied that. Delon stared at him. I envied your freedom. Your ability to be loose. To improvise. To not care what people thought. I was always so controlled. So careful. You just existed on screen. Natural. I had to construct every moment. Belmondo shook his head slowly. We're idiots. Complete idiots. We spent 30 years envying each other for having what the other one had. Instead of asking, instead of learning, instead of being colleagues, we wasted it being enemies, not enemies, rivals. Same thing when it's that intense. They drank in silence. Around them, the charity dinner continued. Speeches, donations, the performance of wealth and generosity. But in their corner something else was happening. 2 men who'd spent their lives competing finally asking the question, what if we'd been friends instead? Delon spoke quietly. Do you know what the worst part is? Tell me. I based my entire career on not being you. Every choice I made, I thought, what would Belmondo do? Then I'd do the opposite. The critics called it vision. It was just reactionary. I let you define me by trying so hard not to be like you. Belmondo nodded. I did the same thing. We were mirrors, defined by opposition. What a waste. Is it though? Delon asked. We both had incredible careers, were legends, were rich, were respected. Would we have achieved what we achieved without the competition? Belmondo thought about this. Maybe not. Maybe the rivalry pushed us both to be better. But we're 60-something years old now. The competition is over. Nobody's keeping score anymore. And I look at you and I don't see my rival. I see another old actor who's tired and probably lonely, and definitely looking back wondering what the point was. Are you lonely? Delon asked. Aren't you? Delon didn't answer, didn't need to. The answer was in the silence. They got fresh drinks again, moved to a small table in the corner, sat down like old friends, which is what they would have been if circumstances had been different. They talked for an hour, not about the rivalry, about everything else, their children, their health, the films they wished they'd made differently, the roles they'd turned down, the directors they'd worked with, the changing industry that didn't really have room for either of them anymore. They discovered they had the same complaint about modern action films, the same favorite classical music composer, the same opinion about method acting. They discovered they were more similar than different. Belmondo told a story about a stunt gone wrong. Delon laughed, really laughed. First time anyone at the dinner had heard him laugh. Delon told a story about a difficult director. Belmondo laughed too. Mutual understanding, shared experience, camaraderie, the thing they could have had all along if pride hadn't gotten in the way. Eventually, the dinner ended. People started leaving. The organizers began their grateful goodbyes. Belmondo and Delon remained at their corner table. We should do this again soon. Actually talk, not compete. Delon hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. I don't apologize. I'm not asking you to. What we did was what we did. But from now on, we don't have to do that anymore. They stood, shook hands again, this time longer, this time with something that resembled warmth. Belmondo turned to leave, then stopped. Alain, yes, you were always the better actor. I was the better star, but you were the better actor, and that matters more. Before Delon could respond, Belmondo walked away, left him standing there, processing words he never thought he'd hear. Words that simultaneously validated everything, and made the validation feel pointless, because it came 3 decades too late. But then again, maybe late is better than never. Maybe recognizing it now means something different than recognizing it then. Maybe the wisdom only comes after the competition ends. Delon left the hotel alone, walked along the Monaco waterfront at midnight, the Mediterranean black and infinite, lights from yachts dotting the harbor. He thought about the conversation, about Belmondo's admission, about 30 years of rivalry that could have been 30 years of friendship, about how pride and ego and fear of being second had consumed them both. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then did. Alain, it's Jean-Paul. I forgot to say something. What? Thank you for tonight, for talking, for being honest, for not pretending. Delon didn't know what to say, so he said the truth. I needed that more than you know, really. I think we both did. Silence on the line. Comfortable silence. Then Belmondo spoke again, his voice carrying something vulnerable that didn't match his public persona. I spent 30 years trying to beat you, and now I'm 65 years old and my body doesn't work right, and nobody's offering me films anymore. And I realize I don't care about beating you. I just don't want to be forgotten. And I think you don't want to be forgotten either. And maybe instead of competing to be remembered individually, we should remember that we're part of something together. French cinema, in its greatest era. That's bigger than either of us. Delon closed his eyes, listened to the waves. That's the smartest thing you've ever said. I'm old. I got smart too late. Better late than never. Is it though? Yes. Because we're still here, still breathing, still able to have this conversation. If we'd had it 3 years from now, maybe one of us wouldn't be here. That's how time works. It runs out eventually. But tonight it hasn't run out yet. They said goodbye, made plans to meet for lunch the following week, actually followed through. started having regular dinners, not publicized, not photographed ever. Just two old actors who'd spent their lives being compared to each other, finally enjoying each other's company. When Belmondo had his stroke in 2001, Delon visited him in the hospital, sat by his bed, didn't say much, just sat there, presence instead of words. When Delon's health declined in his final years, Belmondo called every week, short calls, checking in, making sure his old rival, his old friend, knew someone was thinking about him. They never publicly declared their friendship, never did interviews together, never made a big show of reconciliation, but people who knew them saw the change, saw how they spoke about each other, saw the mutual respect that had finally replaced the competition. At Delon's funeral in August 2024, one of the eulogies was read from a letter Belmondo had written before his own death in 2021. It said simply, "We wasted 30 years competing. We spent 5 years being friends. The 5 years mattered more. Choose friendship earlier. Choose understanding before pride. Choose connection over competition. Because at the end nobody cares who was number one. They just remember who showed up for each other when it mattered." Monaco, 1998. Two aging rivals, one conversation. The beginning of the friendship that could have been there all along if fear hadn't stood in the way. Because the opposite of rivalry isn't defeat, it's recognition. And recognition, even late, heals more than victory ever could.